So generational wealth. Okay. I'm a family guy. I got 4 kids. I was in California last month. Great state at one point. I'm there. We're there at Pride Month. And I'm asking myself, what the hell happened for all of a sudden LGBTQ to own America? What happened for LGBTQ to own the world? World Cup, sports, everything is about them. Small community, that's all we want to promote? Really? That wasn't the case 20 years ago. So what part of this generation thought it's okay for that to happen? Are we back to the libertarian generation where it's like to each his own and do whatever you want to do and who gives a shit? Because a bunch of journalists went to San Francisco this past week to Pride Month. I don't know if you've seen the videos. I'm definitely not going to be playing the clips. Maybe show it to you afterwards. If I show you the clips, you won't believe what's going on in the streets. Kids are standing out there. Men are butt naked with nothing to be shown. And people go up to cops. Are you going to do anything? Did you see a man is on his knees doing what you think is doing to another man while he's peeing on him? They go to the cops and saying, there's kids on the sideline. This is okay? Yeah, we can't do nothing about it. What made any political leader, society, people to think that's normal? Because in no possible way is that normal. When I was in the military, there were plenty of guys in the military that were gay. It wasn't something where we sat there and we're like, oh my God. It's just, all right, man, do your thing. We're going to do our thing. Everybody's good to go. So my curiosity with this whole thing, Neil, is values and principles. What generation loses principles? When you, about a year ago, my interest became about doing generational wealth transfer, okay? And you go and study different families, Rothschild. You go study Rockefellers. You go study Medici family. You go study Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt, apparently the father wasn't that involved with the kids. I think he had 8 or 9 kids. Rob, can you pull up how many kids Vanderbilt had? I think he had 8 or 9 kids. But he didn't give a shit. He's like, yeah, plus what, 13 kids. Okay, my apologies. I'm off by 5 or 4 kids. He's like, whatever. So let me get this straight. This guy's got 13 kids. He's the richest man. And his money only lasts 1 generation, and then that's it? Yes. Why? Then you have the Rockefellers or the Medicis or the Rothschild. It keeps transferring generation after generation after generation. What do they do correctly? So, you know, I'm at an event in Chicago 5 weeks ago. It's a Goldman Sachs event, and it's the 60 billionaire families out of Chicago. You and I were talking about Ken Griffin, Citadel, who left Chicago and went to Florida, went to Miami. That was one of the names that came up. Crown family was there. The Walsh family was there. The Reinsdorf family who owns the Bulls. You name them, all the families are there. And they're kind of talking about how they manage the wealth in the family to not go to the next one. Those who are too reckless and didn't build it based on values and they spoiled, money barely stays after a generation or 2, okay? Even if you're a billionaire, one of the families, their 5th generation, they call the G5s, they had 150 G5s. And that family's worth $14 billion. It's a Crown family, the General Dynamics. It's a very well-known family in Chicago. So it's like, so what do we do if we got, we're a $14 billion family, 5th generation kids, we got 150 of them. What do? We give each of these guys $10 million? We give each of these guys, that doesn't work. You can't give each of them $1 billion. That just doesn't work that way, right? So what is the right model? But to me, someone got casual about certain values and principles that leads to actual moral values, principles being down. Do any of these turnings have to do with a level of casualness towards actual morality? Where we sit there, we're like, yeah, I don't really care. To each his own. Do your thing. You know, like you said, the feminist, the communist. Where do you put the massive LGBTQ movement that we have today that everybody around the world feels? Matter of fact, I'm probably talking about this right now, makes you uncomfortable because it's uncomfortable to talk about it. You could get canceled. People may not buy your books. People may not do anything. Oh my gosh, I don't want to be part of the community that says this.
I grew up in California.
Yeah.
I went to UCSD. I went to UC Berkeley. Back in the day, it was a beautiful state. Everything worked. schools were great, freeways were free. I mean, everything worked. And people poured in massively into that state. As you know, people are now leaving California. And I've been back there. I stayed in cabins in the mountains. I've been everywhere in California. You go backpacking in the Sierras. I used to go up on the, along the coast. It's gorgeous if it weren't for Californians. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That's the problem. I don't understand that state anymore. I go back and I just don't get it. They will continue to lose people, and they will continue to lose congressmen, as they already are. It's going to get smaller politically. And you know which states are gaining. Mm-hmm. We've had now 15 years. Basically, the red zone is winning. The blue zone is losing population. They have higher birth rates in the red zone. They also are getting huge net in-migration, right? What's really weird about this is I've looked back at state migration throughout the decades, and the typical pattern is people move from lower income per capita states to higher income per capita. That's the typical pattern. You think about it, right? Everyone wants to move to a richer area to get better jobs. Mm-hmm. This is the opposite.
That's crazy.
People are moving from Connecticut to Illinois. These are, and California, they're moving into the red zone because the cost of living is so much less. What's happening in America, when I talk about the renewed sense of community,
right,
it's all today in tribalism. We've got a blue zone tribe, we got a red zone tribe, and people don't even care who's at the top of the ticket. You know what I mean? Biden could be dead, and you'll still get 50% of the vote, right? Because that doesn't matter as long as my tribe keeps the other tribe out. The reason why our country can't do anything is right now, this is part of the fourth turning. It's gridlocked, and we're on the verge of civil conflict. Now, I talk in the book about two forms of organized conflict, which have come back continuously in fourth turnings. One is external, the other is internal. And usually it's a little bit of both. I mean, the American Revolution was basically an internal conflict. People don't realize this. The American Revolution was basically patriots against Tories within the United States. More people killed each other within America than redcoats, right? I mean, I think people need to get that straight. And typically a losing side in a civil conflict, whatever side perceives they're going to, on the losing side, calls in external help, right? So that's how you turn a civil conflict. Of course, the patriots thought they were getting drummed, getting pretty beat by the British generals, so they brought in the French. That's how we won. If it hadn't been for the French, my God, we made it a global war. Britain had to worry about a million other things and finally said, okay, we'll let you guys go. In the Civil War, the Confederacy tried to bring in France and Britain. I think they were with one battlefield victory away from doing it. I think if Lee had won at Antietam, which he didn't, but if he had, the British might have actually said, okay, we'll recognize you. And then once the Emancipation Proclamation had been made, it was kind of all over. No European country was going to go inside with the South at that point. But this has been, and we go back and talk about this, but it's often at a razor edge, which way we go, external or internal. And I see the same thing now. If you had gone back in 1938, and remember, the 1938 was 1930s was one of the most polarized political decades in American history. Half of America thought it was the red decade. The other half thought it was the fascist decade, right? It was the New Deal. People either loved it or they absolutely detested Roosevelt, right? And the man who brought it in. We had, and in Europe, I mean, democracies were falling to dictatorships. But everyone thought that the liberal middle was gone. I mean, capitalism was over. It was either fascism or communism. That was the future. And there's incredibly polarized. We had labor riots. We had sit-down strikes. We had the Pinkertons out. It was a charged environment, and we were still mired in the Great Depression. By 1938, 1939, still a double-digit unemployment. If you had asked Americans at that time, you say, we're going to have a huge conflict in America in a couple of years. What do you think it's going to be about? They probably would have said internal. It's going to be, I don't know, it's going to be the right wing against the left wing, in America. No one would have said, oh, we're going to have a global conflict against fascism, which is when in fact happened. So one of the things I like to do is kind of do an anatomy of these fourth turnings and to try to discern what kind of trajectories they take. But one thing you see within these fourth turnings is this growth of tribalism, right? This is what happens in a fourth. Remember how we go from an unraveling into the crisis, and what is people are overwhelmed by is the sense that everyone feels alone. You remember, we triumphed individualism for so long. We all feel alone. I talk to millennials today all the time. I talk particularly to late wave millennials in their 20s. And the one thing I get response most of all is isolation, disconnection, a sense of complete aloneness. They don't have communities. They try to have, ersatz communities, through social media, which obviously just makes them even more miserable, as you know.
Have you read Silent Generation yet or not yet?
Anxious Generation.
Anxious Generation, yeah.
He's a great book and a great writer.
Jonathan Haidt,
Jonathan Haidt.
Phenomenal book.
Yeah. And a phenomenal writer, a phenomenal thinker.
In these uncertain times, if there's anything we need people to believe the future looks bright. So if you've heard about me saying this mission to you, we're on a mission to get 1 million people to wear this gear. And this is what we're doing. If you buy one of these hats, there's a category of buying one hat, getting the second one free. If you haven't yet worn this gear publicly, go ahead and test it out. Buy some of the gear, wear it in public, and see how many people will stop by and say, you also watch Valuetainment? You also follow PBD Podcast? I do too. Place your order. Go to vtmerch.com, click on the link above or below, place your order, and represent the VT and the PBD Podcast gear.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click right here.